And we are good to go. Welcome everybody to our FedOSC Data 101, what is metadata and what does it do webinar. I would like to start with a very brief presentation of the FedOSC project, and then we will present the program and a little bit of the practicals. We will be split into two rooms for two of the presentations, and we will then regroup afterwards in the main room for a debrief and a Q&A moment. The FedOSC project is a project that is funded by BELSPO and operated by Belnet together with the Federal Scientific Institutes to basically promote open science and fair data practices in the federal research community. To that end, we are working on providing tools and services to the members of that research community. We are working on digital services such as DMP Online, which is a data management plan writing tool, such as the Green Open Access repository of the federal research community. We are working on the policies and the governance of fairness data and fair data and open science together with BELSPO. And we are also trying to build capacity and more specifically delivering trainings such as this one. So thank you very much for being here and for attending one of the many FedOSC trainings. We will provide information about how to stay in touch with us, to continue following up with the Data 101 learning track if you are interested, or with our other training activities by the end of this webinar. Today, we are here to talk about metadata. We just had an entry-level training session a few moments ago, which will also be disseminated to all participants in case you might find that interesting. And so we have a very rich program which will provide more of a practical angle on metadata standards. We know what metadata is, we know what a metadata standard is, but what are some stories or what are some examples and use cases about metadata standards and how it has supported or will continue supporting research in general? We will start with a plenary session that will be presented by Sander van Doren, who's a data interoperability architect at the EC. And who will talk to us about the DCAT-AP standard. And then we will be split into two rooms. I will open the rooms later. You will have the possibility to join one room or another, and both will be recorded. We have one room that will focus more on the GLAM side of the story, galleries, library, archives, and museums, and one room that will focus more on the STEM side of the story. For the GLAM room, we will have two wonderful speakers, Maud Henry from the KBR, and Christina Fischer from the Leibniz Center for Archaeology, who will both present metadata schemas, tools, and standards in the GLAM area. And then for the STEM room, we will have two presentations by Maxime and Tobias for the first one about the GBIF standard, and then so Maxime Cooperman and Tobias Muschroth, and another one from Pascal de Rijke, who works at Scienceano and who will focus on the health DCAT-AP. So you will hear about DCAT-AP first, and then health DCAT-AP in the STEM room. We will regroup then for a 10-15 minutes Q&A together. All right. If you have any questions, please type them in the Menti. Prefer the Menti, not the chat box. And I would like to give now the floor to Sander. Dear participants, we have not tried out the presentations. So, Sander, I am going to let you share your screen and just hope that everything works correctly.
Yes. You present. Try again in Teams. Of course, I'll just share the window instead.
Thank you for your flexibility.
In just a moment.
We can now see your screen.
You can, perfect. And yes. We're getting there. Excellent.
We
Thank
can
you
now
so much
see
for
your
your
presentation.
patience. Okay, so very quickly, I'm Sander. I work in the SAMIC team. We're part of the unit that is in charge of digital government and interoperability in at DigiDigit of the European Commission. So we work on everything interoperability, and my team specifically is involved in data standards and making sure that data can flow a bit easier from one administration to the other. So our focus is really public administrations. So that is really our target audience. We don't try to put standards out into the world that are, like Dublin Core, that have very broad application. Our focus is really the public sector. Although with DKTP, we now see applications a bit broader than only the public administrations. But it's good to be aware that it all started as that DKTP was established as a standard to power the open data portals, as you're probably familiar with them, like the open data portal of the Belgian government that Bart here is responsible of, or data.europa.eu, the European data portal. So it's really the data model behind those data portals. So outside of specifications, we do a few other things, but I don't want to spend too much time on this. I just want to zoom in on the specification part here, because we're here to talk about metadata and DKTP. But there is some other things that we do. But within the specification track of our team, we do have two big branches. We have the application profiles that I'll be talking about in a moment with DKTP. That is really about a functional basis for building applications like an open data portal, the data model behind an application. That is something you can, I mean, it's very easy to relate to, because it has a data model like this. It has constraints built into the model, like every data set being described must have a title, it must have a description. There are some restrictions put on top of the model. But then we also have this other strand of specifications that we maintain, that are the core vocabularies, where we don't do all of these constraints put on the model, but they're more basic concepts, like a model for a person, a business, an organization. And those models are more meant to be used as data dictionaries, where you can use part of the model, or you can use it in its entirety. But it's more as a source of common definitions than really to be used as something closed that is operational, implementable in an application, let's say. But I don't want to zoom in too much on the core vocabularies and the technical specifications that we have, but just to give a quick overview of the federation of specifications that we maintain. I think the ones at the bottom are the most applicable here, and those are all the variations of DKTP that we support in our team. There are a lot of DKTP specializations being done either by national or regional administrations themselves, because they, for instance, extend the DKTP model a bit to fit their local context, because they want to make sure that every data set in their context has certain metadata. But there is also profiles that are more related to a domain. For instance, in statistics, there is a profile for statistics, and this allows me to quickly make the bridge to the first presentation, because in the core DKTP profile, it doesn't go into the structural metadata. It will not go into describing what your data looks like within the data set. It only goes about discoverability and the findability of data. But for instance, if you would have a look at the step DKTP profile, there within the extension, the structural aspects, what are the dimensions being used in this statistical data set, those things are also covered in there. Moving on, why do we bother with this DKTP profile in the first place? I already mentioned it very quickly, but we had this need of being able to build data catalogs for findability, because the public sector builds a lot of data. I mean, we collect a lot of data, and it is often a side effect of the operations that we do. But then over time, with legislation coming like the Open Data Directive, this data being collected by one part of the government became much easier shared. I mean, there was an obligation to at least share the most important data sets with not only within administrations, but also with the public for reuse, things like land use or data in base registries is very commonly publicly accessible. And so to make this metadata about data sets exchangeable, we started maintaining this application profile of the W3C DCAT specification to specialize it for the European context, and for instance to have a link with controlled vocabularies that make sense in our European context, like pointing to policy domains. The themes of the data, for instance, is one of those classifications that are layered on top of the core DCAT profile. Now also data spaces are adopting DKTP as the foundation for data for the vocabularies of finding data within data spaces, but I'll come back to that a bit later on in detail with the standardization, with a quick point on the standardization that is going on. And then there is also a specialization for machine learning, but that would lead us a bit too far, I think, if I would go into too much detail there. I think I can go very quickly over this because it's, we covered it in the previous presentations. Why would you bother with metadata of those data sets? It's all about fair data. It's about reuse of the data, discovery, and being able to discover those data sets. And of course, we also want to align with semantic technologies. We are heavily invested in linked data, and so because of this gives us all the persistent identifiers and the stack that is built around linked data gives us those things for free, and we don't have to come up with our own ways of dealing with this. This is a quite recent development, but I think it's nice to point it out. The DKTP is now recognized as an interoperable Europe solution, which means that whenever a public administration in Europe develops a system that changes somehow a binding requirement, and I don't want to be going too much into definitions, but basically people will have to look at DKTP and see if it fits their purpose and at least evaluate the use of it before trying to develop something on their own. And so it got a bit of recognition on that front. I'm moving a bit quicker just to make sure that I can cover everything. But in the end, if we'll have some time for questions, so if something is unclear, feel free to ask for more clarification later on. But yes, so I wanted to highlight a few things in the ecosystem as well that are going on in the DKTP world. And one is that now through the Data Act, there is this establishment of common European data spaces, of which the health data space is one of them, and more on that in a later presentation. But so because of the necessity to have a common way of exchanging metadata in data spaces, DKTP is now in public review for being an ETSI standard. So it's no longer just a specification; it will really be a standard under ETSI to be to have a more long-term reliability aspect, so that people can build on it and be sure that it won't change next year. So that's why we're going through this process of having it really formally approved as an ETSI standard. So that is something that is almost complete, because the public review is now ongoing. We have a set of guidelines that I wanted to point to. If you feel the need to make this kind of specialty DKTP flavor, it will first give you guidance on how do I really need to, and then if you really need to specialize, how you can do it in a way that it is reusable and compatible with other profiles, so that you don't create conflicts. Yes, thank you very much. And about that compatibility, there is another thing I want to point out. I'll share the slides afterwards, so you can get all the links from there. But if you are in the market for creating a profile of DKTP, we have a tool under development, and this is something new that we're working on, which is called Profile Guard. And it takes the schema rules of a profile like DKTP, but the tool itself is independent of DKTP, but it takes the rules of the constraints of the model. So we have shackle shapes to define all the constraints, like every data set must have a title, and it must have exactly one title. And from these rules, it will generate a conformance schema. And this conformance schema is, in its turn, also expressed as a shackle validation model. Not a validation model to validate your data with, but a validation model to validate your derived application profile with. So if you create a health DKTP profile, for instance, and you say, oh, but for us, a title, we can have two titles in our profile. Well, this will cause issues if you want to exchange data with the European data portal, because they will have two titles and they will have no idea which one to render. And so this conformance model, it will validate your shackle model with the rules derived, and say you defined that from now on two titles are allowed. It will raise an exception and tell you that you somehow violated the intent of the base profile, because the changes that you're making to the profile are incompatible with the intent conveyed by the base profile, let's say. In conclusion, if you want to collaborate with us, we're always open for exchanges, invitations to webinars, things like this, pilots. If you want to get started on some of the more newer specifications that we put out on DKTP, we don't run any pilots because it's quite well established, and there's a lot of software already supporting the maintenance of DKTP metadata. But for the newer specifications, we try to have pilot activities to support on implementation. And then you can reach us on these contact details. That being said, I've reached the end of my presentation, and I think we can take the questions then after all the presentations, right?
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Sander. Thanks a lot. I didn't realize there was so much service surrounding the maintenance of a metadata standard. So thank you for providing us with that information. And as you said, indeed, If you have questions for Sander, please type them into the Menti, and when we regroup for the collective Q&A with all the speakers, we will address them one by one. If we don't have time to address your question, don't worry, it will be addressed in a written form after the presentations. Thank you very much, Sander. All right, we will now be moving to the rooms. So if you remember the program, we have 2 presentations in the GLAM track from Maud and Christina, and we have 2 presentations in the STEM track from Maxime and Tobias about GBIF, and then from Pascal, sorry, about Decatapé. So the rooms are now open, and you are free to click on the room that you want to join. So if you browse to the bar above the meeting, you click on rooms, and you are able to see the rooms on the right side of the screen. Please choose the track in which you are interested. Please, dear speakers, join the room that corresponds to your track. And I will hop into each room to start the recording, and we will regroup here in 30 minutes or so.